Whoa, hey, here we are again for a special episode of the Pop Off. This time, not hosted by Jordan Miner, though he is here.
No, I'm dead. I died,
He is.
and this isn't my memorial.
Rest in peace. It's a shame he didn't live to see his book release. So I'm Zachary Cuevas, Matt Buzzy, Jordan
Whoa.
Miner,
Whoa.
and we're here to talk about a big deal, a very big deal. Jordan, your first book is coming out.
It is.
Yeah.
How about that?
Video game of the year.
Wait a second.
Video games, you know them, you love them.
It's back. It's
Yes!
backwards in my screen, but hopefully
You've
it's
got to
proper
show,
for
Jordan.
the
Be
people.
proud of. Yeah, that's a beautiful book. 200 something pages, right?
296 pages. Some would
Yeah.
call that 300 pages.
Oof. I'd go ahead and call that.
And you
300 pages.
you worked at a publisher in a past life, so
I
you've
did,
got,
but this isn't about me. This isn't about me. This is
I'm
about
trying
you,
to
Jordan.
establish your authority. I'm trying to put you over, as I think they say in wrestling parlance.
Yeah, Jordan, congrats on your book, Video Game of the Year. And the book is about, well, every video game of the year, from your
As decided by you.
take. Yeah.
As decided by me and an illustrious panel of guest contributors, including Matt Buzzy, including
that's
some
me.
other people from PCMag. Zach, I didn't know you in time to get you in.
I'm okay with that. I get it. Next for the sequel, hopefully.
Yeah,
Video Game of the Year 2.
Talk to us, Jordan, about the concept. So it's called Video Game of the Year. Obviously, I think you wrote 300 pages about it. It's probably not about this 1 year. And it's a look through video game history more so, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so the whole premise was, there's a lot of books out there about game history, kind of about like from this sort of business angle and this sort of position executives as kind of like the protagonists of history, which I find incomplete, I guess, is a nice way of saying that. So I wanted to write a game history book that was like very comprehensive and very like game forward. Like it's about the games, about like I wanted to do sort of an accessible kind of games criticism book as well. Not just like behind the scenes reporting or like biographies and stuff like that, but like here's why this game is good, here's why it's important. And so we went with this whole of the year format as a way to kind of keep that more digestible, of like you could just kind of pick and choose what year you want. It's very episodic. And also it forced a lot of interesting decisions. I know later in the topic we're going to try to make our own sort of game of the year list, but a big dilemma with kind of creating a game canon is like, just how do you even make those choices? There's so many games out there, there's so many great games, so that involves a lot of hard choices. So with this structure, it forces a lot of interesting choices, of that you're only limited to one per year, or in my case I do like two per year. So there are certain years, a game like 1996 or 98 that had like Metal Gear and StarCraft, and Half-Life and Ocarina of Time.
How could you pick just one? I think that kind of speaks to what you're saying, right? About yes, businesses make decisions, yes, companies make decisions about what they're going to make and what their console is going to do, but in large part, as discussed often and in the book, it's the games that influence what other designers end up doing later. Oh, we got to take this idea and make that. So looking at which game kind of sets that we could probably take a lot of examples from the book, but kind of sets a new path forward for a whole genre, or just inspires other genres to take some of those elements. So it really is all about the game at the end of the day.
Totally, yeah. So it's I use a mix of approaches. Sometimes it is like behind the scenes kind of history stuff. Sometimes it's more just like arts criticism.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just pure opinion.
What was that research like? I mean, you're covering 40 years and you're not 40 years old. So what was the research like? I don't think you went out and hunted down and played every game, but maybe you did. Maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I have played basically all of them in some form or another, except for like Speed Freak, which is like this old 70s arcade game.
Yeah, there was some of the 70s games I was like, oh, like you probably didn't hunt down Atari or something to get Pong going, or maybe you did.
Not on original hardware, but some of that stuff is pretty accessible. There was that recent Atari collection that's really good. It's kind of like a documentary in and of itself. The research. I mean, so I'm not 40, but I have been doing this for a pretty long time at this point. All things considered, for this career,
most of your life, you have played most of these games.
Yeah, I went to college. I went to journalism school expressly to become a games journalist, which is ridiculous. So like, you know, I've absorbed a lot of this sort of just naturally. There's a lot, you know, a lot of like a lot of the games sort of just fell into place of like as to what things just have to be covered, and then kind of moving around from there.
Right. Maybe looking up which games, you know, making sure you covered everything significant that came out in a certain year, or like realizing, you know, checking your facts, checking your dates, which games came out in the same year, and giving you a difficult decision to make.
Yeah. So there's a lot. I had kind of vague enough takes on basically everything just from paying attention to the industry. But then, you know, there's so much other, you know, there's so much other games writing and research out there already. That has documented a lot of this. That, you know, I could draw from for sure.
Was it overwhelming to like? I mean, when you're thinking of this criteria, as we mentioned before, you know, you want to think about the influence to game design and maybe to the industry as a whole. So, what was it like? Was it overwhelming balancing, like, because you're examining every game, right? I mean, not literally, but like you're looking at every game across platforms, you know, from arcade machines to like popular systems and maybe some less popular. So do you feel that was overwhelming, like, you know, thinking, oh man, I haven't looked at mobile games, I haven't looked at PC games, console games, Japanese to Western developers, and everything in between?
For sure, yeah. That was considerations I tried to make throughout the whole book. I tried not to hit the same franchise too many times. I tried to make sure at least all the major publishers were hit, and all the kind of major movements, like you said, mobile games. There's a chapter in there on Super Meat Boy, which was kind of, it could be like an indie game chapter, as well as talk about Flash gaming, which I think is really valued and underrepresented. So, but this is another instance where I think the structure helped a lot, because it's so disconnected, or it's not, but it's so like disconnected, I guess, that I could just kind of focus on one chapter at a time without worrying about like necessarily it's not like I'm trying to tell one gigantic like continuous story throughout the whole thing.
It is binary. Ultimately, you had to pick a game from that.
Yeah, and it's cool. I mean, if I could draw a connection between something else, like a later chapter or a callback to a previous chapter, that's all great. But like, it didn't have to do that.
So it's linear in that it's a year-to-year sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a series of reviews. Basically, you know, we all know about writing reviews.
We love those.
So yeah, speaking of the format, so it's one game picked by you for the year, but then you also have these extra like sections, kind of linking into what Zach was talking about, in order to talk about other games that were influential from that year. And that's where a lot of the guest contribution comes in. So you have this amazing stable of writers giving their feedback and giving you kind of a short.
You're pretty amazing, Buzzy. I agree.
Yeah. Not myself not included, obviously.
I wouldn't know anything about this.
Amazing writers, and also me, in your list of guest contributors, but giving them either an opportunity to write more about the game that you chose as the game of the year, kind of either a personal little essay or just something about why it was so impactful, or just how good the game was. In addition to kind of an alternative pick for that year, which hopefully this is all going to be about a lot of hot takes, but hopefully placate some people for their game not showing up as your pick. It's at least it has a passage about why it was great.
Yeah, that was the point, to get more games in there, to have you know, as much as possible.
How much of that was to head off the idea of people getting mad about your picks, or do you want people to get mad about your picks?
I think more choices will make people even madder.
Yeah, I want people to get mad. That's what this hobby is all about.
Indeed.
Right. It's discourse at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and you know, discourse does a certain thing to me.
So actually, wait, you know, speaking of discourse, Jordan, what is, I mean, the chat, like, we know what games you chose. It's on the back of the cover, right?
Yeah, that's all out there. Yeah,
it's out there. So what do you think your most controversial chapter might be? Because you've got some, I think there are some choices here that I was shaking my head. So people knew I was agreeing with you. I was really into it. But then there were some that spit takes. I was like, whoa, you chose this, Jordan? You did this? And years like 1998 that were so stacked with franchises that like are still important today. So what do you think is your most controversial year?
I got some heat for 2008, which is about Spore.
Ah,
But that's a good chapter for illustrating that sometimes it's not always about the best game, but for a game that I think represents something really important about game history.
Yeah, that was going to be
And
my question about kind of a lot of these picks. I think you can segue back to what you were just going to say, but I was going to say a lot of them. I think looking it over, even just the list of picks, are clearly not what even you would say is the best game of that year. But
yeah,
it's a combination of some sort of influence or important failure like Spore. So yeah,
yeah. The Spore chapter is all about like uncontrollable hype and games that can fight off way more they can chew. And it's just impossible to make a game that does everything you want, that can just kind of be this complete alternate reality that can simulate, all of life from like cells to, just impossible hype.
yeah.
Right. And so I thought that chapter also talks about Kickstarter games that promise way too much, and Pierre Molyneux's lifelong series of grifts. Before Spore came out, there was tons of talk and hype about it. People forget about it. That was like 50
oh yeah,
no,
100%.
that was a game that changed games, and I mean, most people don't even remember it.
Yeah.
But
Impossible expectations is an important part of a lot of gaming, pre-release coverage. Also, an important reason why the book is called Game of the Year, not Best Game of the Year. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's the game of the year.
Right here. Best, boldest, and most bizarre. And Spore's pretty weird.
Spore's a pretty weird failure.
And Spore would mark all those boxes. But what I really liked, Jordan, about some of these chapters, I don't want to spoil too much, but I did like that you didn't shy away from I think some of the greater issues that were faced in the industry or in games. When you're talking about games, you have to talk about things like Depression Quest and the fallout of really weird things like Gamergate, or dealing with crappy authors or auteurs, Minecraft creator, I'm blanking on his Notch.
Notch.
Right?
Yeah. Hatsune Miku, I believe, actually is
right. Sorry, I'm getting blanking on their names. But even stuff like Destiny, which was a surprising choice, but I think you defended it really well. But it's a game that at launch would not be considered a great game, but it was eventually a great game. I like that you don't shy away from those types of things, and I think it gives the book a lot of texture, more than just reviewing and just saying what you like and what you don't like. So
yeah, between Destiny and Sekiro is distinctly not a list of Jordan's favorite games.
Yeah, that's another thing. The Souls stuff. Like I know Jordan, probably #1 Souls hater, which I'm really I fully support. I don't know if Matt's on board with
also a hater, which is definitely gonna ruffle some feathers.
Yeah, it's true. You can read that chapter actually right now on a different website.
What?
As of half an hour, about an hour ago from recording, there's a chapter excerpt on the Sekiro chapter on vulture.com.
Ooh, my favorite websites to browse when I'm not browsing PCMag.com.
Right,
of course.
the whole Zip Davis family of websites. But yeah, that was another interesting kind of cool thing about this was, I compare them to reviews. But when we're doing reviews, they're so like the product is out right now.
Yeah,
we're reviewing it kind of in the moment. So it was cool to write retrospect reviews.
Right.
Was very kind of different, and I think could be a lot. You just have a richer understanding of the game when you can have years and years of hindsight to see kind of how it kind of shook out ultimately.
Right. And in some cases, what it changed into, because today a game that releases its 1.0 might not look anything like what it looks like. Like Fortnite doesn't look anything like it did in 2017.
Didn't look like what it looked like when I saw it in like 2012.
Yeah,
like Unreal Engine 4 demo.
Yeah, so it's
save the world, right?
Yeah.
Fortnite save the world.
You build forts at night.
Whoa!
Remember building?
I don't. But no, so Jordan, this is your first book though. So you even got up to 2022, but 2023 is the year we're in currently.
It is the current year. Yeah.
So I know there's I mean we're hot off of Zelda, which is I don't want to say it, we're halfway through the year, but it's probably the best game I've played this year. But what are your takes on this year? I mean, you got 2022, your Stanley Parable choice, which is a polarizing pick, IMO, but that was still an interesting one. But what do you think about 2023? I feel like games are back in a big way. I feel like there's a lot of heavy hitters this year.
Yeah, I mean, just look at all the perfect scores you've given for games on PCMag this year.
Right.
Zelda, Metroid Prime Remaster, RE4 Remake, some other ones that may get that score or not, depending on how things go that have not been published yet. Yeah, I mean, games right now. I mean, for me, it's Zelda. I don't see anything knocking that off. I don't.
Yeah.
Unless somehow the Todd pulls it off in a way that's never been pulled off. With
Todd's done it again.
The boy is back. It's probably Zelda. I don't,
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm not even gonna pretend otherwise. But
it's really good. Recency bias aside, it's that good. So
it's great. It's phenomenal. It's a shame that it couldn't get its own chapter. But we're still kind of like ruined from COVID, I feel like now we're getting all this stuff that was just sort of backed up because people had to, pause their lives and their development process for longer than they expected.
So we're finally getting the fruits of that labor.
Yeah, we're finally getting stuff made for these new consoles that have been out for like 3 years at this point.
Yeah, I say as I reach for my 10-year-old tablet to play Zelda.
To rewind back a couple years also, one of the things that stood out when you first announced the list of winners is that there was no singular pick for 2021. People asked you what happened in 2021 to make you pick that way. That title is Co-op Bonus Round. You speak to why you made that decision and why there was not an obvious choice.
Yeah, so that one, not to get too kind of behind the scenes-ish, I guess. I mean, so the bulk of the writing for the book was done in 2021. So I was kind of still in it. It originally had ended with Animal Crossing, which was a pretty easy pick because the way that was tied to that moment in time was pretty undeniable.
Sure.
So I wasn't quite sure if there was even going to be anything beyond that. But then, the opportunity for then I started doing all the contributor stuff, and then like enough people sent in submissions for 2021 that ended up being enough for a chapter in and of itself. So like in the normal chapters, you get maybe 1 or 2 kind of guest essays, but 2021 is entirely guest essays, and there's like 4. There's 3 essays written by 4 people, so that kind of being a chapter in and of itself. And then I ended up just having enough takes on Stanley Parable to also then do a 2022 chapter.
Beautiful. There's a nice symmetry. The Animal Crossing pick for the peak of COVID, the peak of lockdown, and then the next year a game about co-op and connecting with your fellow gamers in a variety of co-op titles.
So what's next, Jordan?
What's video games of the year again?
Yeah, the worst games of the year.
That's I don't want to be. You can be mean in an article. You can be mean for like a podcast, or but being mean for 300 pages is just
it's exhausting. Yeah, to be a hater for 300 pages
that's a
gargantuan task.
Poisoning yourself at that point.
Sounds like a drill post. 300 pages of hate.
I mean, yeah, I love doing this. I would love to write another book. So people should buy this one. It's coming out on July 11th.
Yeah. So, pre-order. You can pre-order now at your favorite indie bookstore.
You can go to PCMag.com and see some of the sick artwork that Ren McDonald did for us. I can get up one of the ones that were cleared to show.
Jordan, these are the video games of the year, but these may not be your favorites. These might not be the games that touched your heart. I know some of you actually have some pretty nice, there are a couple of personal anecdotes. I really thought the anecdote about your wife, or not really anecdote, but the time traveler bit in Dragon's Lair. Who would think that Dragon's Lair would help? Well, actually, that's what the game's all about, finding love. Yeah, Dirk daring your way in there.
I'm still getting over people saying my wife. The anecdote about your wife is a very funny thing to have said to me.
Very funny sentence.
Yes. Get ready for that, Buzzy.
Soon.
But what? So let's talk about it, because that's what this is all about. What is your, Jordan? I don't know if you had a list in front of you, on top of your brain, what would you say your top 10 goats are? Your top 10 greatest of all time, aside from influence, just personal bias. Let it rip.
This will be a surprise to both of you. I'm sure you've not heard or seen this list yet.
I've never heard any of your favorite takes about any of your favorite games.
I don't even know you. I would say, after going through this entire process, this very scientific process of self-discovery, balancing the subjective and the objective, art and commerce, all that, my favorite 10 games Let me move this window over so that I'm not looking as awkwardly at another monitor. Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, I would still say. I'm not playing enough Tears of the Kingdom for that to dethrone it. But I would probably even just the novelty of Breath of the Wild would
It's a perfect.
still,
It's close to a perfect game.
It's tough because it's one of those things where even if you think Tears of the Kingdom is a better result or a better game, it's one of those things where it's hard to not give the kind of first pass that first had that revolutionary sort of idea the credit in an all-time list in that way.
Yeah,
which applies to a ton of game series.
Just the way it looks as well. Next, an equally good game would be Donkey Kong Jungle Beat for the GameCube.
With the peripheral.
The drumming controller. Yes. That's a beautiful platformer.
A forgotten platformer, too. I feel like people don't remember Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Because you could only play it on the GameCube with bongo controllers, so that's like a fraction of a fraction. But that's an incredible game. It's a secret prequel to Super Mario Galaxy.
Yes.
Another very underrated music adjacent game would be DJ Hero. That's my favorite of the whole plastic instrument genre.
That's nuts.
Mainly because
that is crazy.
Original songs. They did their own mashups of these songs that I thought were just good songs in their own right. Daft Punk was a playable duo in that game.
I mean, it's hard to argue with Daft Punk being on a soundtrack, you know.
Yeah, and also just the premise allowed for kind of a wider genre variety than you got from like Rock Band and the Beatles Rock Band, and Green Day Rock Band, and Guitar Hero rocks the 80s. Enough of that.
I'm surprised 2009. I actually marked that down on my notes here. That where in big letters, where is the Beatles Rock Band?
Where is the Beatles Rock Band?
I feel like that like rock take goes hand in hand with your like not caring that much about general fantasy take. It's
there's a common thread there.
A common thread, like classic rock. Who needs it? Elves and dwarves, who needs it?
But that's that might be giving a certain group of people too much credit for the invention of rock and roll music, whereas another group of people deserve that credit. Well, watch Elvis and you'll understand. StarCraft. I love that game. It makes my eyes bleed. That's also in the book. I gave StarCraft 2 5 stars like 8 years ago. It's the new chess. StarCraft. It's better than any MOBA. It's fantastic. Smash Brothers Ultimate is also in the book. That's also a fantastic game and a really fantastic kind of interactive museum of video games in a sense. The way it honors these characters.
Seeing the biases come out now.
Yeah. Well, it's here they are again. Super Mario Galaxy. I think is the best Mario
fantastic game.
It plays great. It's got a kind of underlying sadness that you don't get from a lot of Nintendo games, but that really kind of turns into a really cool art object. Speaking of racism, Punch-Out, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out is on my list. That game is awesome. It's one of the only NES games I think is like the best out of its whole series.
Yeah. And it's still like good. Like it's still great. It's hard. Like maybe Mario Brothers might be the only other NES game that I can go back to and like enjoy. But like games like Metroid and Zelda, like you've gotta take a lot of crust along with it when you go back to those games today.
Yeah, it's great. It's a cool representation of boxing as this sort of weird rhythm, like puzzle boss rush kind of thing. It's great. Tetris Effect. Tetris is a perfect video game, and I think that's my favorite version of it between the way it looks and the music and all the synesthesia and whatnot, and all the sort of like Lumines influence from Mizuguchi.
They already nailed Tetris with Tetris, so you just gotta make it look and sound better. There's no other way to alter it, really.
Yeah.
There's no bad version of Tetris, I think.
I would have said Tetris 99, but then they added multiplayer to Tetris Effect, and it's like, okay, well, this is now
you can get that. You can scratch that itch elsewhere.
Silent Hill Shattered Memories is another really cool game that's I like as another sort of weird prequel to other games that I like, in that it was a Sam Barlow joint before her story and immortality and all that stuff. Had a lot of those concepts early on. So people like Silent Hill 2. That game's also great, but I'm a big fan of Silent Hill Shattered Memories. And Metroid Prime Remastered. This might be another weird recency bias because I just reviewed the original game, I guess. But I just reviewed the remaster for Mag. I gave it 5 stars. That game is incredible. It is like the GameCube's Ocarina of Time or Mario 64, and that's this perfect 3D translation of this 2D classic.
They really popped off with that one.
Yep.
They really did.
Whoa. So that's my list.
Nice. So how many of those, off the top of my head, not a ton of them are this is I mean, for example, we talked about at the top, your actual favorites, and not even the best, but your favorites versus the most important games. How many of those are crossed over as the game of the year picks in the chapters of your books?
Yeah, so a lot of them are in there sort of as secondary picks because I couldn't let them go. But like I mean, so Tetris is in there, obviously, but like original Tetris is in there. Punch Out gets a side pick. Smash Brothers has a full chapter. StarCraft is a side pick. And Breath of the Wild is a side pick.
Yeah.
So that's like half, and half of that is not even the main chapter.
Speaks to your dedication to ignore your own takes and get some games in there that you can agree are the most influential, even if they're not your personal favorites. If we were to try to combine now all of our takes, all of our individual tastes into some sort of aggregated list,
sure,
we could probably pull that off.
I see zero crossover between these three lists here.
That's a bit
interesting.
Of a problem.
What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, a bunch of the games I would happily have Tetris on a list like that. Some of my personal faves, most of, if not all of my personal favorites, haven't been mentioned by you at all. I do think our tastes are three that are pretty widely varied, which does speak to the difficulty of doing lists like
this. And to the variety of video games, how far they've come.
How far they will go.
Yeah, a couple of mine I'll rattle off rather than we'd probably take hours to actually debate a realistic top 10 list that reflected us and included some real all-timers that should be on there. Some of my top picks: Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, probably my favorite game of all time. The immaculate vibes and the amount of depth and just the number of things it did in an open world game back when it came out, really still holds up. For some playing it for the first time, maybe not, but man, I could still play that game today. It's a marvel. Similarly, I'm a big RPG head, so Knights of the Old Republic, Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, some of my favorite games ever. Going outside of that, toss up between Breath of the Wild and Majora's Mask, I think is my favorite Zelda games. Two very different things, but I love the vibes of each in their own way. Pokemon Blue probably would be on there. Foundational and very influential, both to me and to the wider gaming market. Hard to overlook. That's an example of the series where, like, yes, games have done it better since. They've done more since, but you can't overlook that favorite. Hades, probably the most recent game I think on my list. Not traditionally a big roguelite fan, but I love that game. I think it's that's masterful design, tying in a lot of different genre elements. I know you're a fan of that as well, Jordan. That game probably not on your top list, but chapter.
That
makes an appearance in the book.
And Witcher 3 gets a whole chapter.
Yes, and that is, spoiler, the game I chose to write about, The Witcher 3, for my excerpt in the book. I think that game is a RPG classic, instant modern classic. Rome Total War, big strategy fan. That could easily be Civilization 2 as well. I love both of those series. Apex Legends also, my favorite battle royale by far. Always played shooters. I have hundreds and hundreds of hours in that game, and I think I named 5 or 6 titles that wouldn't appear on either of your lists easily. So also shout outs to Football Manager. I'm not going to pick a specific iteration because annual iterations, but if I add up all the time I've spent in those games, holy cow. There's a lot of hours in that series, which is great fun and really boring to a lot of people.
Zach, we don't have much time left, so you can just rattle off yours without being challenged. There's no time to argue.
Perfect.
No time to argue.
No, actually, I do have Resident Evil 4. I have Resident Evil 2, the remake, which I think is my most recent pick. I think it's perfect. Probably the perfect remake. It's an amazing game. Resident Evil 4, the OG, because it is that great, a game that defined third-person shooters, and it's just really fun, really replayable, great game. Metal Slug 2, I like a sequel, so I like Metal Slug 2 is my perfect. I played that game in a video store outside of my apartment. My mom worked there, and I was there almost every day, just playing the same level, Metal Slug 2, over and over again. Memorized it, love that game. Dead Rising, I think, is the first real next-gen game I've ever played. The first, I got that on 360. Okay. I was like, look at all these zombies, look at all these things I could do.
That may be the most wild game on any of our lists.
You think so? Dead Rising?
But I like it as a pick.
I like that angle of it.
That
is next-gen game.
That is probably the least likely game to appear on other people's lists.
It was the first game I was really like, wow, this is like a new, like I'm putting my 360 through its paces. Speaking of 360, personal pick, Ghost Recon. I mean, all these personal picks, but Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter was my first like real online game where I was jacked in Xbox Live. I was, that's my first kind of like branching into online community with my own voice. I 13-year-old online, love getting yelled at by older men, but also it was a growing experience. I was in the trenches growing along with this online culture. That
shout out Halo 2 for me.
Another two more PsyOps, the Mindgate conspiracy, which is a real deep cut, but it is a PS2 game. It was developed by Midway, and it was about this guy who had psychic powers. And this was in the days where you could make a game based on physics alone. You didn't need any plot. You gave them guns, let you throw someone around and let their body kind of ragdoll around was all you needed to make a great game. And it was such a cool thing. Again, it was another game that made me feel like, wow, this is something new. Like a new technology at work or something like that. And it was just simple ragdoll physics, throwing people around and throwing them into meat compactors and stuff. It was a classic game. Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, switching from ultra violence. Harvest Moon: A Wonderful
Another
Life.
game where you throw people around.
You throw all about chill. Harvest Moon games are all about just being chill, and it was such a chill game, and it came at just the right time in my life that I achieved Zen, I think, playing that.
Congratulations.
Game. And Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, another sequel, but also great game. My favorite, played that all the time. Another game that I also was like, it kind of like, I felt like my mind opening to like what a game could be, shooting a box and watching oranges roll on the floor and then watching a guard slip on that was enough of a game changer.
And then learning how truth doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, that too, but Rez, which is a game I'm mulling over. And so it's something that comes and goes. It's on its face, it's a simple on-rail shooter. You play a computer program and you're just going through these, you're saving Mother Earth. But it is, I think the longer I play it, it's more and more brilliant to me, just the way it uses music and visuals and that synesthesia that Tetris Effect taps into. Rez was first to try it. Yeah, the precursor to that. And it's a game that I think has gotten better with age. Every iteration I play. The recent PS5 VR version, for my money, probably the only reason to own that thing. And of course,
you saved the worst for last.
Everyone's favorite pick, Xenoblade 2.
So anyway, my book.
So anyway, yeah.
Let me tell you about
Perfect
Xenoblade 2. It's a great game.
It's out. Mute his mic. Cut his mic.
Oh, listen to the haters.
Unbelievable. Never mind what I said about Dead Rising. Unbelievable game to appear on anybody's list is Xenoblade 2.
It's out July 11. You can buy it from Jordan's book or just come to my house.
It's a great game.
Grab Jordan's extra copies.
It saved JRPGs.
That's a mark against it, as far as I'm concerned.
Another copy right here.
Thanks, Jordan, for writing this book.
Thank you for the
starting
book.
Discourse.
Thanks for talking to me about it.
Yeah,
it's been in my head for like 2 years, and it's really wild that other people get to read it now.
Our amalgamated list, as a result of this conversation, looks something like some combination of a Zelda, a Resident Evil or two, Metal Gear, Morrowind, KOTOR, Witcher. There's a couple of games we all agree on and like, but not a ton of crossover. And you could see these games and more debated in Jordan's book, which you should all read. Great writing from Jordan, and a list of guest contributors making it very compelling. Yeah, thank you so much to tuning in here to Pop Off. I've been Matthew Buzzy, Jordan Miner, and Zachary Cuevas. Woo! Thank you so much for watching. Read all of our content and game reviews and more on PCMag.com.
Bye, guys.